All right, so a lot of people, if they're gonna mess with their knife and everything, will tape it up there. The advantage to these Rough Rider knives is they're inexpensive. You can practice your sharpening stuff on this and not sacrifice much. I mean, you're risking maybe $15. Um, but anyways, what I do is this one is an older one. I don't know what the new ones are. They've got some plastic in it, but this one has a notch built in there for smaller, like pocket knives and stuff, which is what we're going to deal with. I try to put it up on the widest part. Like, this has a swedge that's going down here. I try to set it back here with this long nail clip. And I still have like a dime that I've included in my kit here to help tighten this down. But what I try to do is I set it up here, try to make sure it's parallel, and then I just start tightening this wing nut. The main reason is because you want to get this gap even. If you've got this tightened down too much, when you tighten this up, you're not going to get it even. I also check to make sure that this is seated before I get totally carried away. So I just make sure that's pushed all the way down and it's level, and then I hand tighten this up pretty well, pretty good, because you're going to be holding this and you don't want the angle to change or move around. And that feels pretty good. That seems like it's all right. So we got that set. The next thing I do, I could have done this before, but I take a Sharpie and I mark the edge of the blade. And the reason why you're doing this is you want to make sure that you're taking you're going down all the way when you sharpen. Sometimes when you're sharpening it'll get bright. So we mark it on that side, and then we go over here, and we mark it on this side. Right, so now we got the blade marked, and we just set up our stones. Now, it comes with usually a bunch of different handles. I only use just one, but you want to make sure it's flat. All right, and then I go with the coarsest stone right here, which I believe it's 120 grit is the coarse diamond. You place it in like this. Now this is a part that's really important that a lot of people skip or don't realize. You push this flat right here, you push this piece down, and then you tighten the crap out of this. Because this is really what's going to be maintaining your angle. If you let this go up and down, your angle's going to change because it's going over here on this thing right here. Now, this base comes in handy just for holding it. For me, I don't always just work off of a base. You always want to make sure that when you're starting to that this is tightened, that your clamp is tightened, and that you're selecting the same angle each time. We're going to go with 20 degrees. And what I do is just, let me get a chair and sit down, because I'm trying to look through the lens and do this at the same time. But I really enjoy sharpening a knife. I mean, if you've got a bunch of knives and you don't know how to sharpen them, they're really easy. Now, the way Lansky shows how to do this is push forward and then ease up on the knife, and then push forward and ease up. Some people go back and forth. It's really, I start off doing it kind of like this, and you can see how it's getting shiny and it's coming up, it's taking off a lot of material. The coarse one, the first one that you use, you want to take the most time with, because if you think, okay, that's good enough, I'll just take the rest of that angle out when I get to a different stone, it's going to take you a lot longer, because the other stones are doing more of a polishing. They're starting to, instead of taking material away, But we're going to go consistently with this one all the way through. The tip is another area you want to concentrate on because that's what you use a lot of times when you're poking into something or cutting. You're going to make your initial cut with the tip. And if it's really dull, it's going to really, the material is going to drag until it gets to the sharp end. Another important part is down here. This one is usually messed up towards the choil or the tang of the knife. A lot of times they do fairly well with their edge along the whole side, but then something happens towards the end. And that's another area when you're cutting. Sometimes you're only going to use this part of your knife when you're holding something. Just cut that in. So you want that end sharp. You want the tip. Really, you want the whole section sharp if you can get it. And if you've only got one blade, like on this trapper, you want to make sure that blade is as good as you can get it. All right. Now, what I do is I look at it, and I can see that there's no more black mark on here. There's just a little tiny bit of black mark up there. And there's a little bit of black mark down here. So that's where that Sharpie comes in handy. Because otherwise you could eyeball this and say, it looks like it's good. But the Sharpie will tell you, no, you're missing a section, which is right up here. So I just concentrate on that. I'm just holding it like this on the side. I'm not trying to go with the angle. I'm just trying to keep this flat. This helps me hold back here up against the other part right there. Like I said, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to say, oh, well, that's close enough, because this is important to keep it consistent. You want the same angle. You want to have a good apex, basically, a crown point. And the more consistent you can get this, the easier. If you do the other side the same way, they're just going to match right up. This one's almost done. There's just a little bit right there at the tip. Just a tiny bit. And like I said, this is kind of a zen type of thing, you know, because you can sit there and you can just take your time and you're not in a rush, but you want to do a good job. So you just sit there and you can not worry about anything else, you know, you're just concentrating on the task at hand. And in the end, you're really going to be satisfied with the way it looks and the way it cuts and everything else if you've done it right. And if nothing else, you're gonna make the blade much more consistent. You know, usually you're not gonna mess it up. I'm just trying to make it all even. Then towards the end of using the last stone, I kind of lighten up the pressure. I'm not pushing real hard to begin with, but I lighten up the pressure and I try to go in one direction with it. As you can see, I'm kind of swooping that way with it. Right now it's putting in rough grind marks on the edge and everything else, but alright, we've got all of the black. Now all I got to do is just flip it over. Once again, I'll just check, make sure that's tight. And because you've been using this a little bit, just make sure that's tight. I just check the angle again. We make sure we're going up through the 20-degree slot up here. And then we line it up. And now we're ready to do this side. This base tends to unscrew too when you're holding it a little bit. But got everything all tightened up. And now here we go on this one. Get it in camera here. I don't know if the overhead view is the best thing for this, but it's really like the only thing I can use right now to show the process. All right. Let's work on this middle section a little bit more. All right, the burr is on this side. And when we're talking about the burr is the whole edge will kind of like flip over. And as long as you get it consistent on one side, you're doing good. Because what I'm doing is I'm dragging my finger along and I'm feeling if it's grabbing, that's the burr. I can feel it all the way through here. The burr is consistent. Here it's not as much. So to get the burr to come up on this side, you have to grind on this side a little bit more. So I'm just trying to get the burr consistently on one side. Just basically trying to get everything. We'll flip it over. Still needs a little bit more work on this end here. Just a little bit more on this end right here. Pretty close. It doesn't have to be super perfect. Now, since we've got this all pretty much the way we want it, we're going to switch stones. So, all I do is take this out, put it back there, and now I'm going one grade up. I'm going to my 280 stone. It's also a diamond stone, but it's 280. 280 grit. And we put this in here. The smaller the number on the grit, the bigger the particles on the stone. And the more material, the coarser it is. So we're working our way up. I'll just make sure that's flat and consistent. We make sure we're going back into the 20-degree mark. Just tighten, everything's cool. Tighten up the base, and away we go. Now I don't mark the blade again with the Sharpie. This is now getting to where it's taking out all those, or a lot of those coarse marks that were from the bigger grain and everything sharpener, the last one, and it's starting to polish it. It'll still do, like if you notice some area where like, hey, this one's not quite sharp enough on this side, you know. I don't really count the number of strokes I'm doing. I just kind of like, I start going along with the blade, and you can kind of feel, a lot of this is texture, but you can feel when the angle is consistent and that you're going along the same line. Alright, so that's enough for right now on this side. It's not, we're just going to keep flipping back and forth. Alright, so again, I make sure I'm on 20 degrees. You're touching the bottom of this over here. You're not letting it go. It doesn't give you a whole lot of room to run roll around in there, but it does a little bit. These systems are not super expensive, and they will do an excellent job of reprofiling your blade or even sharpening, one. Usually you don't, like I said, you don't need to go this whole process most of the time. Now what I noticed up here is there's still a little bit of black up in here, so I'm going to have to work on this edge a little bit longer just to get it to go up here. Now I could switch back to the 280, and if I would have left the rod in the other one, I wouldn't have to line it up. I could just throw it right in there, but no, I took the rod off. I only use one rod. I guess that's why they supply a bunch of different ones in there. Oh, sorry, I was off camera. But this still takes off, sorry, bump that. This still takes off enough material that you can do some reprofiling on areas where you haven't taken enough. It's just going to take a little bit longer. That's why I said that initial removal is the most important one, because it's going to set up the angle, and the rest of these should really just be like polishing the cut that you've already made, not so much as taking off more material, but it will do that. Now I don't test the sharpness on paper through each one, just because, like I said, if you've got a different way of doing it, that's fine. I'm not, however you get your knife sharp. This is just the way I do it, and it's worked. It's worked for me throughout the decades. And you can see this is 440A. So it usually just gets the job done real quickly. But if you were dealing with D2 or ZDP 189 or Maximed or any of those other S30V, S35VN, it's going to take a while longer. Because the diamond's going to have to work a little bit longer to take off the material. And you're going to be at it a bit longer. It's not impossible, especially with diamonds. It'll usually get that material taken off a lot better than stones. The advantage of diamonds is you don't have to use any oil or anything. You still can. You can put water or oil in there. It helps remove the material and transport it, away and stuff, but you don't have to. After a while, you'll be able to see the burr. It'll basically reflect light on the end differently. The edge will be one color, and then the rest of the knife it'll shine differently. These are not the most technical terms and everything, but all right. Now I'm just gonna wipe the particles off. I always try to wipe away. Alright, we got a burr on this side consistently, so that's good. If I wanted to, I'm just gonna hit it one time with this side just to knock that burr down a little bit. There we go, just a little bit. Now it's over on the other side. Good. That's perfect. That's the way it should. If I roll this way, it just rolls right off. I don't feel anything grabbing my finger towards the edge. But as I come this way, I feel something grab consistently along the edge. That's where this edge is rolled over. It's just good. That's a burr. We're not finished sharpening. Alright, so I'm just checking the consistently, just Consistency, just eyeballing it, looking at it, looks nice. Looks nice. There's just a little tiny part up here where I could probably have ground more, but I'm not really worried about that. That's fine. Compared to the original edge, I don't know if you can see this. Compared to the original edge, here's the original bevel up here, and this is my new bevel down here. Now, if I wanted to make this completely consistent, I would keep grinding this with the larger stone until it got over there. You know, it got equal, that it basically got up to the frosting on the knife. But I'm not going to do that right now. I can always do that later. I'm just showing you how to reprofile and why you would do it. The same way over here, it's a little bit thinner down here, but we basically improved the angle of the edge. You can, it just depends. It's your knife, you know. I mean, it just depends what you want. I'm going to go for more of a working edge than a cosmetic edge. So, you can always, you know, continue to sharpen them. All right, the next one up is a 600 grit. Now, this is the stone. You can see how a stone works. I've got a 600 grit in diamond. They basically call it fine diamond. I'm going to use that instead. So once again, I set this guy flush, get the angle straight. Really check these because these wobble loose. And if that wobbles loose, then it's going to change your angle. All right, now when you get up here, now you're going to feel it. It's getting a lot smoother. And it's gonna take those scratches and stuff off the edge and start getting towards more of a mirror polish. I'm not really looking for a mirror polish edge. I can get one if I want. It might wind up being a mirror polish edge, but I'm more concerned about how the edge performs than how it looks. Sometimes on some steels, a little bit of a toothy edge there helps it to cut material a little bit better. It just depends on the steel. Usually this 440A will take a nice, shiny mirror edge on it. And I don't know how practical that is, or if it makes it super sharp, but it does look good when you get a mirror edge. Alright, that's not 100% consistent, but my burr is on the other side, so I usually do it, you know, a couple of passes on each side. I do the initial smoothing out, you know, and then I'll just go back and forth messing with the burr. I've never cut myself doing this. I mean, I guess if you put your thumb down there too far, you could do that, you know, but it's got these grooves up here and everything, and I just have always done that. Usually when I cut myself, it's after I've sharpened the knife and I'm disassembling it or something, cleaning it, something like that, on like a modern folder, and that's when I'll cut myself. Trappers, traditional trappers, because I grew up around them, I just kind of like developed a habit of how to handle them, and usually don't cut myself with them. I haven't done anything recently. Last time I cut myself with a traditional was probably in my childhood, which was a long time ago. When you sharpen a knife, sometimes your initial edge a lot of times is done in a factory on a grinding wheel. They don't always cool them down and stuff like that. Just depends on who's grinding. But if you get too much heat on the edge right here, you can basically anneal the edge and make it softer. The rest of the knife could be a certain temper, but the edge was softer just because of the heat. When you start sharpening it, you're taking that metal away, and you're getting basically the edge grind. Annealing is going away, and you're getting back to the original temper. I don't know how much that's going to affect these Rough Riders, because like I said, they usually don't have a problem with their tempering. Or 440A is easier to, it has a wider range that you can mess with on its heat treatment and still come out with a decent knife. Whereas D2's got a more narrow range, but we're not dealing with D2, we're dealing with 440A. I like 440C, 154CM, stuff around this. I don't mind 440A or AUS8 or AU8CR 13 MOV. I really like more like the 9 CR18 MOV, 440C range of material. But for, like I said, for what you're going to be using these knives for, I just keep going because I see a little like dent or something right here. But this edge is getting pretty good. Let me just get right over here on the tip a little bit more. Right, that feels pretty good. Now we'll just flip it over. Again, this thing loosened up. You can clamp them down. They got one that has a base like this where it's a C-clamp, and it has this built in, so you could just put it on the table. Like I said, I like this one because I could just hold it like this in my hand. I don't even need this base on it most of the time when I'm sharpening by hand. But for this camera and for this particular video, I'll leave it like this. Now you can change the direction that you're polishing. You can go like, I'm going, you know, towards the hilt this way, but you can switch it around. I'm just doing it like this right now. I'm just looking really closely at it and looking at the scratch marks from the file from the last stone and just smoothing those out, trying to take most of those out. Like I said, you can, each time you switch your stone, remark the blade, and it'll help, you know, see if you're getting where you want to be getting. I usually don't do that. I mean, maybe I should, but like I said, this is not necessarily going to be 100% perfect, but oh well. It'll give you an idea how much time it takes. Like I said, I may fast forward parts of this. Yeah, the burrs on this side needs to be worked on a little bit more. The burrs not completely on that side. The reason why I'm checking the burr is just to make sure that edge is completely consistent. You know, like if there's no burr, then that means that this side hasn't been sharpened enough down there. I'm just going up here just to... It's really starting to feel like it's in that edge now. All right. Yep, just a little bit more right here. This area right here is the hardest part to get consistent with your bevel. every knife, you'll have the edge good all the way up here, but just this last little part is really hard to get consistently sharp, consistently the same angle. I'm probably taking off more material than I need. I'm just, like I said, messing around with this. It's not super critical. Yep. I keep seeing a slight imperfection right there. It just depends on which way you hit the angle of the light, but it's like a dip in the blade, like a little dent. Alright, I think we're pretty good on this side. Almost cut myself on that one. Yep, we're all good here. Alright. Yeah, there is just a little... Nope, that's the burr. Yeah, this edge is looking pretty good. I'm liking that. Alright. Like I said, you can take a little break. You know, you don't have to completely do this marathon like I've been doing. I've been running this thing 32 minutes. So I'm going to take a little break before I switch to the final one, which will be my ceramic polishing one.